Oh, hello, friends. I'm sorry. I didn't see you here. I was just identifying some plants that I gathered on a recent walk around my neighborhood. I want to show you something that's really incredible that I've never seen before. I found these interesting little tomato berries, but look, the leaves are growing right out of this fruity berry. I'm going to look up what it's called, but I've informally named it the thorny leaf berry because there's also thorns all over its stem. But since you're here, I'll set this aside because it's time to read a story. Let's look at what we're going to do today. It says, hello! Today we will read The Other Way to Listen by Byrd Baylor and 2, Make a Sound Map. Now last week, I read to you a story called Carl and the Meaning of Life. And then I asked you to go out into nature around your house and notice things like ants, plants, trees, and try to find out the meaning of their life. Now today's book is a little bit similar. We're going to dig a little bit deeper with that concept, and we are going to read a book called The Other Way to Listen. Now in school, listening is so important, and we know what listening looks like there. It means our ears are open, our mouths are closed, our eyes are on the speaker, and our bodies are calm. But we're going to learn about another way to listen in today's book. Now, I have a list of things I'd like you to think about. These are deep questions while we are reading today. And I want you to think about, does a teacher always need to be a human? Does it always need to be an adult? And can we learn from things like hills, ants, trees, the stars, or weeds? Why or why not? Since we've been out of school, you're seeing your teachers, and you're probably spending a lot of time with your parents, who are also your teachers. But I wanted to get us thinking about maybe some of the other things that can teach us. Now, you're probably thinking, Stephanie, if I'm learning from hills and ants and trees and stars and weeds, and I'm listening to them, they don't make sounds. How do I listen to something that doesn't make a sound? And that leads us to the second question. Can we learn anything from silence? From just being really, really quiet and sitting with that quiet and listening to these quiet things. So, lock that away in your brain. Turn on your thinking eyes. Because it's time to read The Other Way to Listen by Byrd Baylor. Here we go. Oh, I forgot one thing. Okay. Now, I told you that we are going to be listening to some things in this book that we don't normally think of as making sounds at all. For example, one of the things we're going to hear in this book is corn singing. Have you ever heard corn sing? But someone in this book does. Someone in this book also hears the seeds in the springtime underground cracking open and growing. Is that something you've ever heard before? No. We are also going to hear the stars in the sky. And we are even going to hear a cactus explode into 21 blossoms in the night. All right, here we go. This is Byrd Baylor's The Other Way to Listen. And very, very small in the distance here, we can see 2 people, a young person and an older person, walking in nature. Oh, look, it's morning. The sun has just come up in the desert, and there's a yucca flower growing. The Other Way to Listen by Byrd Baylor. There they are, and it looks like some corn over there. Let's see if we can hear it sing. I used to know an old man who could walk by any cornfield and hear the corn singing. Teach me, I'd say when we passed by. I never said a word while he was listening. Just tell me how you learned to hear that corn. And he'd say, it takes a lot of practice. You can't be in a hurry. And I'd say, I have time. He was so good at listening, he once heard wildflower seeds burst open, beginning to grow underground. That is hard to do. There's the seeds. He said he was just lucky to have been by himself up there in the canyon after a rain. He said it was the quietest place he'd ever been, and he'd stayed there long enough to understand the quiet. I said, I bet you were surprised when you heard those seeds. But he said, no, I wasn't surprised at all. It seemed like the most natural thing in the world. And he smiled, just remembering. So he wasn't just sitting with the quiet for a little while, right? He sat there long enough to hear those seeds split open after the rain. Another time, he heard a rock kind of murmur good things to a lizard. I was there. I saw the lizard sunning on a rock. So, of course, we stopped. There's the lizard and there's the rock. The old man said, I wonder how that lizard feels about the rock it's sitting on, and how the rock feels about the lizard. He always asked himself hard questions that take a while to answer. We leaned against another rock, and a long time passed. And then he said, Did you hear that? They like each other fine. I said I didn't hear anything. He said, sometimes everything being just right makes a kind of sound. Like just now. It wasn't much more than a good feeling that I heard from that old rock. Were you surprised to hear it? I always had to ask. He said, not one bit. It seemed like the most natural thing in the world. I said I wish I'd heard it too. And he said he thought I might. Someday. But how? Wouldn't you like to hear singing corn and seeds breaking open and what rocks are saying to lizards? I wonder what the secret is to being able to hear those things. He told me how a friend of his once heard a whole sky full of stars when she was 7. And there she is, looking at the stars, and she can hear them inside her head. Wow. Later on, when she was 83, she heard a cactus blooming in the dark. At first, she didn't know what she was hearing. She found it by just following the sound. There were 20 flowers on one cactus, and they were all as white as the moon. The old man said, most people never hear those things at all. I said, I wonder why. And he said, they just don't take the time you need for something that important. I said, I'll take the time, but first you have to teach me. I'd like to if I could, he said. But the thing is, you have to learn it from the hills and ants and lizards and weeds and things like that. They do the teaching around here. Just give me a clue on how to start, I said. Okay, so is the old man the one that's going to teach her how to do this? No, the plants and animals are the ones that do the teaching, right? But here he is about to give her a clue on how to hear all of those magical things around us. And so he said, do this. Get to know one thing as well as you can. Now, it should be something small. Don't start with a mountain. Don't start with the whole Pacific Ocean. Start with one seed pod, or one dry weed, or one horned toad, one handful of dirt, or one sandy wash at the bottom of a hill after a rain. I said, oh, I'll take the sandy wash. He said that he started with a tree. Every morning of his life, when he was young, he climbed a cottonwood tree and sat there listening. He told me it was worth the time. He said trees are very honest, and they don't care much for fancy people. He said he doesn't know of anything he ever did as important as sitting in that tree. Tell me everything you can, I said. He said, well, you have to respect that tree, or hill, or whatever it is you're with. Take a horned toad, for example. If you think you're better than the horned toad, you'll never hear its voice, even if you sit there in the sun forever. And he said, don't be ashamed to learn from bugs or sand or anything. I said, I won't. He thought of one more thing. It's good to walk with people, but sometimes go alone. That way, he said, you can always stop and listen at the right time. I'll remember everything, I said. And I did. But nothing worked. There she is, walking on the hillside. And I think she might see a little coyote and some quail. I thought there must be something wrong with me because I only heard wind and quail and coyotes and doves and just things that anybody could hear. I almost gave up trying. Of course, I still went walking in my hills. In fact, I used to sing to them a lot. I thought that since they wouldn't sing to me, I'd just sing to them instead. The day I'm telling you about now, I was singing, and the whole song was this. Hello, hills, hello, hills, hello, hills, hello. That was after I'd been away 5 days, and I had missed those hills 5 days. I went out earlier than usual. You know how everything looks new at sunrise? Well, those hills were looking new. And I was just walking where I always walk, but that morning I kept thinking, here I am. And whatever way I happened to go was always right. I climbed the rocky side, not the path. The rocky side is steeper, but I like it best. And anyway, that's where I found my 3 hawk feathers. Have you ever found something super special and magical on a hike? Finding 3 hawk feathers would be a real treasure. All I know, this part's important, is suddenly I wasn't the only one singing. The hills were singing too. I stopped. I didn't move for maybe an hour. I never listened so hard in my entire life. And I like this picture because we can see her face here, her nose and her eyes and her hair. And it almost looks like she sat there for so long that she became part of the hill, right? And they're singing together. Now, of course, their kind of singing isn't loud. It isn't any sound that you can explain. It isn't made with words. You couldn't write it down. All I can say is it came straight up from those dark, shiny lava rocks, humming. You can see kind of the hum coming up in the illustration. It moved around like the wind, and it seemed to be the oldest sound in the whole world. Rocks make some of the oldest sounds in the whole world because they've been around for so long. And she kept practicing, and she was finally able to hear it, right? The hills and the rocks became her teacher at last. All I can say is I was standing in the middle of that sound at 7 o'clock in the morning, just thinking, here I am, and thinking, listen, and not even being surprised. It seemed like the most natural thing in the world. And there she is, having that great moment where she finally succeeds at listening that other way. Very different from the listening we normally do in school, right? So that was the other way to listen. We had one more thing to do on our list, and that was make a sound map. And I will show you the one I made earlier today. Now, to make a sound map, you are going to step outside on your front porch, and you are going to take a piece of paper and put an X right in the middle. That is where you are sitting, okay? You're at the middle where the X is on the map. Then I want you to close your eyes, and if it helps you, you can put on a pair of fox ears and just listen, okay? On my sound map, and as you're doing this, you'll mark down the things you hear. Don't focus too much on drawing, but across the street from me, I did a very simple drawing, focus on the sound, of somebody mowing the yard. And then right by me went a car. And right above my head, there's a bird that lives in one of the terracotta shingles on my house, and it was singing. In fact, there were lots of birds singing, so I did lots of dots. And over here, there was a weed whacker, and if I listened closely, I could hear the sound of each stem of grass snapping. There's a beautiful purple rose in my garden right now, and I heard a bee buzz around it. I heard some people further up the street softly speaking to each other in Spanish. It sounded beautiful. And I heard someone taking out their trash. All right, I hope you enjoyed today's story about the other way to listen, and I hope that you try to use that new way to listen in your everyday life. Also, have fun making your sound map. Have a great day, and I will be back soon with another story. Bye, friends.